and welcome to a special Thanksgiving edition of the Oddity Archive. A special Thanksgiving edition that has nothing whatsoever to do with the holiday. It just happens to drop on the day, or I hope at least. So anyway, it seems like I give this speech every year, but according to YouTube, 70% of my viewer base is right here in the US, and it does make sense that when I put out a new video on Thanksgiving Day, because Archive just had to be a Thursday thing, that they generally don't do very well, or if they do, it's well after the fact. So it always feels like kind of a wasted effort on my part to do a serious new episode, as serious as one can get sitting behind a cardboard box. And a good compromise is just to do kind of a greatest hits sort of deal. I consider it a bit of comfort food for your Thanksgiving. But also, since I'm doing just kind of a greatest hits thing, this should play well anywhere in the world on any given day. It does not have to be a Thanksgiving thing at all. But anyway, for this year, I decided I wanted to take a look back at some of my personal favorite VHS tapes, specifically VHS, to have been fully properly featured on this show. And I have found that this is going to work better in terms of narrative if I present them in chronological order of appearance on this show. So with that, if you're into the more whacked out side of the archive, yeah, this episode's for you.
Hi, kids! I'm the Happy Hamster! I'm so happy to be joining you so that we can be together.
I guess it's appropriate to kick things off today with the, second all-time most infamous piece of archive lore, behind the Max Headroom hijackers. Of course, Aimvest Video was the subject of the first VHS Vault episode, and a very, very tentative first episode. I seem to be going for a hybrid riff session and history lesson with that one. Anyway, the thrust of the episode was me confronting something that scared the hell out of me as a little kid, which, as I soon admitted in the episode commentary, was just a plot device and not an actual childhood memory. But then and now, I think the Happy Hamster fills a certain mental place that a lot of people can relate to. And that is that most people had that certain, at times unintentional scare as a kid. Perhaps it was clowns or the Santa Claus at the mall, but almost always something that falls into a grotesquifying, that's a word now, of a would-be normal thing. In this case, it's just a mutant hamster.
And I'll see you later.
Sometime very early in the run of this show, I picked up a public domain VHS tape of old Flip the Frog cartoons. Not because I'm a cartoon connoisseur, mind you, but because I was kicking around the idea of a recurring subseries where I would riff whatever, ideally short, public domain material I found. And of course that became the, currently on ice, Archive Riffs subseries. Anyway, unsurprisingly, once I popped in that tape, any thoughts of riffing the cartoons went right out the window. Also unsurprisingly, I found myself soon looking up Aimvest Video online and falling down a bit of a rabbit hole. One that continues to this day. Indeed, as of late 2024, a real history of Aimvest and its predecessors and successors has yet to be properly pieced together. But what has been pieced together is every bit as warped as you would expect.
Donald Duck, and one of my favorites, Woody Woodpecker.
Emphasis on pecker!
Great fun that I'm sure you'll be watching over and over again.
Because once you've gone rodent, you never go back! I think I can safely say the riffs for the Happy Hamster wraparounds, that sounds dirty, remain the easiest riffs I've ever written. I mean, I think the whole process took me 20 minutes. Really, to this day, I've never had a piece of material write its own jokes the way that one did. And before you ask, yes, there is more Happy Hamster material out there. AimVest had a 5-tape series of movie trailers hosted by the Happy Hamster, which are exceedingly rare. Probably because there's some probably unlicensed copyrighted material on those tapes. Over the last 11 years, I've only managed to accrue 3 out of those 5 tapes. Needless to say, yeah, it may be still quite a ways down the road, but I don't think we've seen the last of the Happy Hamster on the archive. Oh yeah, and the raw Happy Hamster wraparounds are available for viewing on the Archive Annex channel. It makes a pulsing noise just in and of itself. It's actually worse when it's plugged in, but I don't know if the mic is gonna pick this up, but it's a little unnerving. The Halloween episode of 2014 was also intended to be the pilot, if you will, for a recurring segment, Archive Wares. The idea was that since so many, for lack of a better term, appliances and such during primarily the 90s came with videotape tutorials, covering the item and their respective tutorials seemed like good archive fodder. Now, as am I making this, I still haven't completely written off any further Archive Wares episodes, but none have ever come to pass. Largely because the bulk of the tapes are for things like vacuum cleaners, not so interesting items. Anyway, the truly infamous and Halloween appropriate one was the Rejuvenique facial toning system, which was already internet infamous at the time. But in my own defense, also at that time, nobody had ever posted or really even acknowledged the complete tutorial video, and I felt like I had a good, unused punchline to the joke that was the Rejuvenique, so I just went and made it that year's Halloween episode.
Contact areas on the mask directly above the eyes should align on or slightly above your eyebrows.
The tutorial itself is the sort of video I live for. This is the kind of video that is so utterly devoid of self-awareness that if I tried to parody it, I couldn't get it half as off-kilter as the real thing. In a mere 10 minutes, we are treated to actual images of what not to do with the mask, excessive use of soft focus, hopelessly dated music beds, even back then, and a good extra dose of unintentional horror. And yes, this video is available in raw, complete form on the Archive Annex channel.
Occasionally, the contact areas on the mask may have to be adjusted slightly in order to have them touch the face. Facial zones 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the grounding areas are designed to allow for custom adjustment of the mask.
Just as a little bit of extra horror, when I was researching the material for the episode, the initial plan was to actually use the Rejuvenique in the final episode. Now, notoriously, the Rejuvenique effectively shocks you into tightening up your skin, using a conductive gel on the brass pin heads, read electrodes, that populate the inside of the mask. Needless to say, I was unenthused at this prospect. So in the name of a safe test with an easy escape, instead of wearing the mask, I tested it using the back of my hand, so I could simply lift my hand in case something went wrong. In that test, one of the electrodes, sure enough, let out a rogue blast of power, burning a small dent into the back of my left hand. The scar on the back of my hand did heal about 6 months later.
While you can relax and enjoy Rejuvenique in a variety of settings, never immerse it in water or rinse it under the tap. Doing so will damage the system.
I admit, I always enjoy finding public domain tapes with unique features on them, and none were more unique than the Heckle and Jekyll tape I excerpted on the original public domain VHS episode. Now, when I first picked this one up, I could obviously tell it had been altered in some way to accommodate a Spanish-speaking audience, but I had no way of knowing if it was subtitled or outright redubbed until I popped it in. Well, sure enough, I was greeted with redubbed cartoons, which isn't inherently bad, but the audio was obviously punched in, with completely different music beds suddenly appearing as well. Oh yeah, and all the voices were poorly done by two men. All the voices, male, female, young, and old. The prints used were probably third-generation videotape dubs, complete with someone else's on-screen VCR display at times, with no effort whatsoever at balancing the color levels and so on. And for the cherry on top, there was one George Pal puppetoon in there that some might consider offensive these days. This may very well be the single most surreal tape in my collection. Now, I would post this to Archive Annex, but I have an awful feeling it would get shut down. Look at it this way, the most out there moments already appeared in the episode.
Mira.
Knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone. Doesn't take a scientist to know where that came from.
And welcome to the Oddity Archive. Oddity Archive. Oddity Archive. Oddity. Oddity.
Straight to the point, it entertains but educates the show.
I've long maintained that the first video magazine episode is one of my favorites. Strangely enough, though, my favorite tape of that particular lot is the one that I am truly not in the proper demographic for. That would be specifically TeenVid Volume 2. Now, whereas Volume 1 was largely about teen idols, some established, some failed, Volume 2 doesn't even deliver that for the most part. This one was largely about the hangers-on to the teen idols. It was also about cynically selling clothing and other products to kids. It was about pushing vegetarianism, and at times it was about pushing comically shallow planet-saving tactics to kids. Really, if it's yellow, let it mellow is far more sage advice than anything dished out on this tape. Couple that with the absolute worst of early 90s fashion and culture, and it's a wince-inducing good or bad time. Now, this one was already on YouTube before I discussed it, and as of my making this, it is still there in its entirety, so yeah, I feel no need to post my own copy.
Don't take 10 showers a day. Don't keep changing your outfit. I know my little sister does that all the time, and it drives me nuts. She changes her outfit like 3 or 4 times a day, and every outfit goes into the wash, and right there, that's a bunch of water down the drain, literally. So.
A couple of quick side notes here. For one, TeenVid was spearheaded by one Stuart S. Shapiro, the same one that spearheaded a little show called Night Flight. And he also spearheaded probably about 75% of the other VHS video magazines made during the late 80s and early 90s. Secondly, I lamented in the episode that the 2 volumes of TeenVid, Volume 3, while teased, never came to pass, that those 2 volumes of TeenVid included mini-magazines initially, but I didn't have them. Well, a couple of years after the episode dropped, I heard from a viewer who had the mini-mags, but not the tapes, and the magazines were passed along to me. As such, making me the proud owner of complete copies of the complete run of TeenVid, and probably putting me on several watch lists in the process.
Welcome and happy holidays from my home to yours. During this wonderful season, we generally remember some of the Christmases from days gone by. But in our hearts, we're always home for the holidays.
This is the first of 2 Christmas videos we're revisiting today, and I think I can safely say this is my single favorite off-the-wall Christmas tape, period. So of course, this was the work of organist Dennis Awe, who is now in his 80s and is still very much active as of my making this. Awe was a longtime pitchman of sorts for alternately Lowry and Technics brand organs, but his video efforts don't really pitch any particular brand of organ. They seem to be first and foremost vanity projects. Dennis's first and most notorious Christmas effort, Christmas with Dennis from 1988, seems to be his attempt at recapturing the spirit of Liberace's famous TV Christmas special from 1954, granted famous largely through public domain kinescopes. But the difference between Liberace and Dennis Awe was Dennis had to keep things on a much smaller scale. Whereas Liberace had a studio audience, an orchestra, and a whole posse sitting in with him on stage by the end of the show, Dennis had no audience, no orchestra, and only 3 guests. His sister, a very disinterested and silent Santa Claus, and a knockoff My Pet Monster puppet.
Well, I'd like to know, what's your favorite Christmas song?
Easter Parade.
Easter Parade?
Could you bring the cue card closer? Thank you. Line, please.
Oh, sorry, Ralph. What's your favorite Christmas song?
Rockin' around the Christmas tree.
Well, for you, Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree and the Jingle Bell Rock. Here we go.
Yeah.
I don't claim to be a fan of organ music, but there is something very endearing to me about Christmas with Dennis, and it certainly doesn't hurt that Dennis really seemed to believe in it. Combine that with the choppy editing and the downright rotten sound quality. Seriously, there's tons of print through, and the tape only peaks around minus 20 dB. But with those little quirks, the tape winds up feeling that much more otherworldly than it would otherwise. If I were to throw a Christmas party, I would probably throw this one on just for the reactions. As am I making this one is available for complete viewing on YouTube, just not by my hand. Dennis Awe's second Christmas video, which I covered in the same episode, was completely unavailable when I covered it, but it has since found its way to YouTube as well, and Dennis Awe himself has reissued it. Alas, the original 1988 session remains exclusive to the original VHS.
May God grant you much good health and happiness. Bye for now.
Happy Halloween, everybody. I'm Gordy Falk. And this Halloween, I want to teach you how to carve a few really innovative, neat jack-o'-lanterns, simply and easily.
The thing that makes a great VHS vault tape isn't just being riffable, it's being unintentionally amusing in its own right. On paper, the 1994 Vampires pseudo-documentary really should be the standout tape from VHS Vault Volume 17, Vampires and Pumpkins, but the truth is, it's about 30 minutes of material stretched out to 90 minutes and needlessly spread out over 2 tapes to boot. But the amusing parts did work well. For me personally, the true keeper from that episode would be the other tape I covered, How to Carve Great Faces for Halloween, first released in 1988. Host Gordy Falk, alas no U in his first name, takes us through a mad rush of various tips and tricks on basic, and I mean basic, pumpkin carving. As implied, this isn't about creating intricate designs. This is about going for quantity over anything else. To make it even better, to this day, I am convinced that Falk only had a single half-hour tape to work with. The main tutorials, which make up about 85 to 90% of the tape, appear to have all been done in one continuous take, albeit with some very minor internal editing later on. As such, we are treated to whatever happened to be going on in the background. For one, doors are heard opening and closing throughout. But best of all to me, we are treated throughout the tape to a stream of consciousness session from Gordy. His rant about eyebrows will never not be hilarious to me.
And there he is. What else do we have to do? Every human being has eyebrows. Unless you're one of these high-fashion gals who plucks them out. But we'll pretend that you're normal, and we'll give you a couple of eyebrows. We'll talk about eyebrows a little later. Eyebrows are an accent.
Couple Gordy's hosting Rush job with a pair of awkward slideshows, actually just poor close-ups of photos, and the recurring, hyper-compressed, downright throbbing harpsichord soundtrack, and you've got yourself a true winner. Now, of course, like clockwork, a couple of months after I covered this tape, Red Letter Media covered it as well, and they were the ones who were able to relaunch that tape as a cult classic. Indeed, since then, Lunchmeat VHS has reissued, VHS only, of course, this tape, and they coupled it with another less amusing pumpkin carving tape, which I happen to have an original copy of as well. I've just never covered it. Anyway, as for catching this one complete and unriffed, as I'm making this, How to Carve Great Faces for Halloween is available on YouTube at least twice over, and there's a good clean copy on archive.org.
We didn't say you could do this in a suit, but it's good enough to carve.
In 2017, I added the Jingle Cat's first album, yes, there are more, and the, thankfully, Soul Jingle Babies album to the old Christmas crap collection. That same year, by some unholy non-miracle, I stumbled onto a copy of the Jingle Babies VHS tape, same songs as the album, and proceeded to cover all three in that year's Christmas special. 3 years later, I got my hands on, apparently, the second edition of the Jingle Cats VHS tape, featuring music videos of sorts of the songs from the album I had previously covered. Now, whereas the Jingle Babies tape was woefully uncomfortable due to the kids' facial expressions, Jingle Cats was far easier to take. Because, you know, cats only have two modes, indifference and contempt. Oh yeah, and the Jingle Cats album has some good healthy instrumental breaks on it to help break things up. So really, in short, you get all the insanity of the Jingle Babies tape without as many of the creepy vibes and incessant crying. Like Christmas with Dennis, this is one I'd play at a Christmas party just for the reactions. And also, as am I making this is indeed available, officially no less, in its entirety on YouTube, albeit broken down into individual songs.
You were born to sing.
Can we get a level on the tracks, please?
Great. Let's go from the top. You were born to sing.
To close things out today, let's take a look back at the tape that, in retrospect, got me into weird old videos. When I was about 18, my big ambition in life was to become a singer-songwriter, but I couldn't sing worth a damn. Being a broke teenager, I attempted to hopefully tutor myself into some degree of competence and proceeded to hit up the local library. It was just God's little joke that the only 2 items they had on vocal training were a pair of VHS tapes, and quite possibly the 2 worst tapes one could get on the subject. One was a beginner's rock vocal tape, hosted by Vanilla Fudge bassist Tim Bogert. Their keyboardist was usually the lead singer. The other tape was a general-purpose vocal training tape called Born to Sing, also known as Sing Like a Pro. To put things in perspective here, both of these tapes were later rendered infamous by the Found Footage Festival. Indeed, Found Footage Fest fans are probably all too familiar with the May segment from the Tim Bogert tape.
Good girl. Work much better. That's right. Very good. That's In a rock and roll band, the singer is the center of attention. Good singers make it all look easy, but the voice is an instrument as well. It takes practice to get the most out of it.
I wound up settling for the Tim Bogert tape as my main teacher, which as it turned out was a bad move. My pitch only marginally improved, and really more than anything else, it made me that much more of a stiff, uncomfortable singer, and it took me years to unlearn that tape. Anyway, as for Born to Sing, I never learned a damn thing because I couldn't stop laughing. I proceeded to check out Born to Sing numerous times simply because I thought it was hilarious. It took me over a decade to finally score my own copy of it, but yeah, I think I can safely say that was the one that spurred me into starting to buy goofy-looking tapes at the thrift store.
Meow, 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 meow. Ready? Breathe. Meow, 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 meow. Here's another phrase for your upper mix. Seems like we lost that old-time feeling.
Well, before I end this segment, I suppose I should briefly discuss the tape proper, huh? It looks like an old SNL sketch. The exercises are completely absurd. The hosts are more of a caricature of teachers than actual teachers. The aforementioned hosts are way overly perky, and so on and so on. Just watch it sometime. Now, a couple little endnotes here. When I transferred the tape for the episode, it was so worn out and not by my hand, and it was so poorly manufactured initially that I had to settle for a compressed DVD recorder transfer of it just to keep the video and audio in line. The transfer that I used in the episode wound up being loaded with all sorts of jitter and skew and other play errors, which in its own way kind of helped my own final segment. It gave it a little extra flavor and gave me a little extra ammo to work with. Now, I did post this one in its entirety to archive.org because at the time one of the hosts seemed to still be plugging the old video, which he had just reissued on DVD.
The way to find the vocal cords and feel the focus is to use a kind of a scolding sound like this. Ah, ah, ah. Ah, ah, ah. With your mouth open as if ready to bite an apple, try that with us. Ready? Breathe. Ah, ah, ah. Again. Ah, ah, ah.
Well, that's it for today's archive. Join me next time when Crazy Benny has the ultimate VHS sale. Yes, that's right, all titles 50% off. Once we mark them up just to mark them back down again. Black Friday, you know.
I just want to say welcome to the Kid Picks Happy Hamster Club.